So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today to the Urban Thinkers Campus. Today we will take the pulse of sustainable construction worldwide by discussing the key insights of the 2025 Sustainable Construction Barometer published last month by the Saint-Gobain Sustainable Construction Observatory. I'm Charlotte Kahn, and on behalf of Saint-Gobain and UN Habitat, we are delighted to join you live from the auditorium here at the Saint-Gobain Tower in Paris. So welcome to all of you joining us here on site in this room, and to the great majority of you watching us online. Thank you for being with us today. So we are gathered to explore the state of play of sustainable construction today and how we can move forward. From the global north to the global south, how can we unite the numerous stakeholders of the construction value chain around common objectives to sustainably transform the built environment now and in the future? And all of you are here because you are agents of change, true catalysts for collective acceleration. Now, a few words about our program to start with. Very shortly, we'll welcome Thierry Fournier, who's Senior Vice President, CEO for Southern Europe, Middle East and Africa at Saint-Gobain, and Edlam Abera-Yemeru, Director, External Relations, Strategy, Knowledge and Innovation Division at UN Habitat. And after that, we will talk about the state of play, like I mentioned, of sustainable construction, with a presentation of the main insights of the barometer by our friends here from Occurrence Ipsos. Thank you for joining us. And this will be followed by a roundtable discussion with Pascal Eveillard of Saint-Gobain, Vincent Quitio of UN Habitat, and Hélène Chartier of C40 Cities, after which we'll address the questions you may have. I'm sure you have loads of questions already in the room and online, of course. Here is a QR code that you can scan here in the room to send us your questions if you don't want to do it live. We'll have microphones at your disposal to do that. And for those of you watching us online, please just use the chat box to send us your questions. We'll address them at the end of our panel discussion. And of course, we encourage you, as usual, to share your thoughts, your views about the 2025 Sustainable Construction Barometer on social media by using the following hashtags flashing on the screen right now. But for now, as promised, please join me in welcoming our first guest, Thierry Fournier and Edlam Abera-Yemeru. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So I'm going to start with you, Thierry, first of all. Could you maybe start this campus by reminding us why a global and large private business like Saint-Gobain wants to be at the forefront of efforts to accelerate sustainable construction, and why you started the Construction Observatory?
Thank you, Charlotte, for the question. The humankind is facing three monstrous challenges. The first one being the fight against climate change and the need for reduction of CO2 emission. The second one is about preserving the natural resources of the planet, considering that the 15th of June or 10th of June every year we have consumed all what the planet can produce in 1 year, so it's totally unsustainable. And the third challenge is to answer to the demographic growth and the rapid urbanization all over the place. So construction, yes, it's part of the problem, and there is only one way out if we want to tackle these challenges in construction, is to promote light and sustainable construction. We, as a worldwide leader in that field, consider that it's our duty to do our best efforts in order to promote and animate the ecosystems of construction wherever we operate, in order to drive for more sustainable and lighter construction everywhere. That's why we launched this sustainable observatory with three tools. First one, the barometer that we will discover today. The second is a series of conferences all over the place, and international or national, in order to share, discuss, making sure that we are aligned and accelerate together. And the third is to unite the ecosystem through a series of medias in order to train and educate all the stakeholders around this topic. So we are eager to accelerating and making even more efforts toward that. It's our duty, once again, and we do believe that it's the only solution that we have altogether.
Thank you very much for that, Thierry. Now, Edlem, from your perspective at UN Habitat, how urgent is sustainable construction to address some of the world's most pressing challenges, environmental and social?
Thank you so much. So from the perspective of UN Habitat, which is the United Nations Human Settlements Program, and it's the agency that's tasked with advancing sustainable cities and sustainable urbanization, this is extremely urgent from many different perspectives. So we do know that humanity is urban. Humanity will continue to be urban, and so our future is tied to what happens in our cities and in urban areas. And our data at UN Habitat shows that as much as 3 billion people today face different forms of housing inadequacy. In other words, 3 billion or more people do not have adequate housing today in different forms and in different shapes across world regions. And within this also, we find that at least 1 billion of those live in extremely deprived conditions in slums and informal settlements. And what we see from our data and evidence is that this housing crisis, which is ravaging all parts of the world, is actually interacting, as you said, very closely with the climate and the conflict crisis. So we're seeing millions more people being displaced from their homes and falling into further conditions of deprivation. So it is also a key question for the global economic ecosystem because housing is a key driver of economies. And so in this respect, when we think about fulfilling the demand for adequate housing globally, we must also ask the question of sustainability. Because in making more housing accessible, increasing the stock of housing globally, unless we address questions of sustainability from an environmental perspective, from an economic perspective, the affordability question is really central. And so we would be falling back into critical challenges if we don't look at sustainability as we try to address the issue of adequate housing globally. So for us at UN Habitat, we do a number of things, but just to highlight what our role is in this global context, first, we convene and we connect the right kind of actors, and this is why we're here, partnering with Saint-Gobain and other actors, because we must connect and we must convene in order to address this challenge, given the enormity of the challenge. Secondly, we also develop knowledge and insights and data so that our decisions are also well informed. And that's why the barometer that we'll hear about today is so critical, because it all starts with the data to have the right kind of solutions, particularly because contexts are varied and contexts are very different. So you need tailored solutions. And the only way you can have tailored solutions is with the right kind of data. And we also, of course, the third role we play as UN Habitat, as the United Nations, is to look at what are those solutions and practices, because solutions exist. We have no shortage of actual solutions that are workable in different contexts. The challenge is going to scale. And in order to go to scale, you need to connect practices and actors.
Thank you very much for that, Edlem. A more personal question here, but you see that it has a universal value. You are both truly global citizens. I mean, Thierry, you oversee Southern Europe, Middle East and Africa, but you grew up in Africa. Edlem, you are originally from Ethiopia, but you studied in Europe, and you're based in Kenya. So you're both very well traveled, and you have both grown and evolved in an environment, in a world with very different needs from one region to another. Hence my second question to both of you. How do we reconcile the need for a systemic and a global approach, as well as one focused on local needs?
I would say that construction is local, basically. So you extract raw materials locally, and you build houses locally with material that you produce locally. So we were together in Venice 2 weeks ago. I remember an Ethiopian architect telling us about the need for decolonization of construction. Let's stop forcing countries which are not used to very advanced techniques to use them. Let's use their historical legacy, their way of building first, and let's be incremental everywhere we are. We were talking about affordable housing in Latin America. I used to be based in Brazil before. I've been working extensively in order to find solutions. It's not so easy, but when you are in a favela, you don't offer plasterboards or ceilings. You try to offer a cement board instead of a plywood for a wall, just as basic as that. So you have to be pragmatic, simple, respecting local needs, local culture, and legacy and knowledge of people installing and living in this kind of housing. So this is my, let's say, experience after 20 years of, let's say, trips all over the world regarding construction.
Edlam, I'm sure you agree with that.
Fully agree. And I think the issue is that we need to deconstruct what sustainability means in different contexts for different actors and for different sectors, I would even say, because it doesn't mean the same thing in different places. And therefore, the commitments that we see, the actions that we see are highly varied, but it starts with the commitment. So I think if there is a great variance in how sustainability is understood and how it is perceived and welcomed or not, then that's, really quite a challenge. And here we know that context matters a great deal. Sustainability means different things in different places. The challenges are different, the opportunities are different. So I think there we first need to have that alliance of common understanding around what sustainability means in different contexts. The second piece, which is equally challenging, is that, yes, local actions are where it all matters and where it starts, but at the same time, local actions alone cannot resolve, the scale of the crisis that we need. So we need the multi-level sort of actions and actors to connect with each other and advance this going forward. But the third point I want to highlight is the tensions. And I think the tensions arise when you look at different contexts. And one of the greatest tensions is indeed the affordability question. So the perception in many contexts is that sustainability is expensive. Sustainability is a luxury, at least from an environmental perspective. So I think that unpacking of what it means and how feasible it is, and the fact that there are simple, affordable solutions that can work in different contexts, I think we need to do a lot more work in that respect.
Absolutely, and a change of mindset, of course, about the solutions available out there. A very quick last question to both of you. You've mentioned how complex it is to bring out sustainable construction, of course, because of the, local and global needs and how we systemize it all and scale it all up. But what's also complicated about it is the vast number of stakeholders involved in the full value chain of the construction sector. So to both of you, very quickly, tell us about the role of collaboration here, maybe the opportunities for the campus here and for the people watching us here in the room and online.
Well, I would say very simply that we are on the move. Things are gaining pace, we are accelerating all together, and the results of the Barometer this year show that. What we need to do is just going even faster, and I would emphasize the need for training and education. For the youngest generations, so that we will build better tomorrow than today. And here we have a lot of things to do.
Training and education, I've got the feeling that's something we're going to discuss here later on today during our panel discussion. Edlam, collaboration.
Collaboration is essential. And I do think that what is happening here is a testimony of what collaboration means and why we need it across sectors, across actors. The magnitude of the challenges we face and the scope of work that we need to do means that we cannot do it without collaboration. So that's a big part of why a UN entity is here collaborating in the same conversation, of course, with Saint-Gobain and other partners. This is why we're here.
Well, many thanks to both of you. You've talked about the importance of starting from somewhere with the right data and the right insights. That's what we're going to do next. But before we do talk to our friends from our current CFOP about the survey, the Barometer, a big thank you to both of you for your conversation starters here. Thank you so much. Thierry Fournier and Edlam Yemeri. So it's now time to go through the key takeaways of the 2025 Sustainable Construction Barometer. A reminder that it's published by Saint-Gobain Sustainable Construction Observatory, and it's more than a snapshot. The barometer really is a compass. It's a way to see where we are, where we want to go, and what it will take to get us there. So to find out more, I'm delighted to welcome Alban Jacot and Grégoire Hervé-Bazin, both from the Research Institute Occurrence IFOP, which carries out the study for the observatory's barometer. Please come and join us now. And a warm round of applause, please. Many thanks to both of you for joining us here this afternoon. So first of all, this year's barometer, well, it offers the most global and the more in-depth perspective yet ever. You have surveyed a larger array of stakeholders from very diverse backgrounds. So can you first maybe tell us about your methodology and what changed this time compared to previous editions?
Indeed, that's something that is very important to understand first, is that the methodology has actually, I would say, improved this year because we have more than doubled the number of stakeholders that we have interviewed this year. So we have no more than 4,000 stakeholders respondents coming from 27 countries. Stakeholders are, just a reminder, that they are either professional from the relevant sectors, students, members of associations, and local elected officials.
And the big news this year was that we also surveyed citizens. We interviewed 1,000 citizens in each of the 27 countries of the Barometer. And this is really a big change because it enables us to go beyond the perspective of the internal sector to understand how society at large understands sustainable construction. So that was very interesting this year.
Well, it's important indeed to include not just the experts, but the people who are living in those sustainable buildings we are building right now. But let's start with possibly the most important question here. Do stakeholders, so people who are linked to the industry itself, know about sustainable construction? And is there a global consensus, or are you seeing stark differences from region to region?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's actually maybe one of the number I think you should remember from today. It's that the fact is that awareness is growing. We have now 93% of stakeholders that have heard about sustainable construction and 67% of stakeholders that feel that they understand it clearly. That's a very positive result, and this number has actually, that's a global increase of 6 points since last year. As you just said, there are some regional differences, and for instance, the awareness is even highest. It's the highest score of awareness is in the Middle East with 79% of awareness, the lowest being in the Asia-Pacific region with 59%. But even if it's the lowest score in Asia-Pacific region, we have seen a 15-point increase in awareness since last year.
And so there is a real awareness gap. And this is a challenge that needs to be addressed.
And this awareness gap, are you also seeing it amongst the general public? Is there also a patchy level of awareness globally?
Yes, when we look at the general public, the pattern is similar. Globally, we see that 8 citizens out of 10 have at least heard about sustainable construction, which is already a very high result. And 38% think that they know precisely what it is about. But here again, we have some difference between regions that are quite striking. And we see on one side, in the Middle East, we reach 56% of citizens who think they understand well the concept. In Asia Pacific, it's also quite high with 48%. And on the other extreme, we have Europe, where the result is 31% of citizens who think they understand it well, and North America, where 26% of citizens think that they grasp the concept correctly.
So we've discussed general awareness around the concept of sustainable construction, but does everyone agree on what sustainable construction is? That's the big question, another big question indeed. And do they agree on what they think it looks like?
Well, the solution, the answer to this question is quite surprising actually, because we can see in the respondents' mind that the green perception of sustainable construction still leads in respondents' mind. This is reflected in the main criteria that the stakeholders use to define what sustainable construction is. They say it's energy efficiency, they say it's the use of ecological materials, and these two aspects remain at the top and quoted by more than 3 out of 10 stakeholders.
And what's interesting also is to see that resilience is gaining ground. So we have gained 8 points since last year's barometer on this topic, and now 21% of stakeholders think that a building's ability to withstand climatic change is a core element of sustainability. So that is really important because it's the sign that climate adaptation is no longer an option, and that resilience is really becoming a key expectation very fast.
And there is one last thing I want to share about this chart is actually that there is one major aspect that remains underrepresented, we feel, in the results, and that's the human dimension. As you can see, the last bar on the chart, it shows that only 15% of stakeholders link sustainable construction to the occupants' well-being, to the health of the occupants, a figure that has barely moved in the past years.
Well, that's very surprising indeed, because there's a growing body of evidence that shows how buildings affect our health and general wellness, but also, of course, our physical and mental comfort, productivity. I'm thinking here air quality, thermal regulation, good acoustics, etc. It has a big impact on how we appreciate life and go about it. There again, any regional differences about the definition and understanding of what sustainable construction is?
Yes, indeed, we see that the very definition of sustainable construction is widely different depending on the region. And so you see those differences highlighted in light blue behind me. What we notice is that in Asia Pacific, in Africa and in the Middle East, what stands out more is adapting buildings to natural and climatic hazards, so resilience. In Latin America, the use of ecological materials stands out. And in Europe and North America, the focus is more on carbon neutrality.
I think what it shows here is very much aligned with what we just discussed here, that we need strategies that are aligned globally, but must also be locally adapted. And how do citizens feel about it and what sustainable construction is? Do they agree with experts, or do they have different views?
Well, actually, it was quite surprising for us, because the view of the general public and the stakeholders are mostly aligned on what matters when they talk about sustainable construction. So the general public ranks ecological materials the highest, especially in Latin America and Europe. Energy efficiency also scores very high, as you can see, 34% on the charts. And just like stakeholders, as Alban said, in Africa, in Asia Pacific, in Middle East, the general public give more weight to climate resilience as well.
And in the same way, we see that as for the stakeholders, citizens put health and well-being at the bottom of the list, and they barely register. It's only 15% of citizens who say that they see them as an essential aspect of sustainable construction.
Okay, so even the people living inside the buildings being produced here do not put their own health and their own well-being at the center of sustainable construction, which is another very interesting factor indeed. Let's move on now to the perceived importance and priorities for sustainable construction. How does it feel, how urgent does it feel to stakeholders, and how do they think we should go about it?
Well, when we ask stakeholders if they say that implementing more sustainable construction is a priority, important but not a priority or secondary, we see that there is a consensus on the necessity and the urgency of going forward, because we have 7 out of 10 stakeholders who consider that sustainable construction is a priority. And nearly all of them, so 97%, say that it is at least important. So this sense of urgency is high everywhere, especially in Latin America. And we see a bit more contrast in Europe, but it's overall high everywhere.
Okay, so very encouraging figures here, 69%. That's obviously quite high in terms of priority. And what about the general public? Does it share the same sense of urgency as the stakeholders?
Yeah, well, that was one of the key findings of the study. And honestly, we are not in the field of construction, and we were quite surprised to see this number, because 60% of citizens also see sustainable construction as a priority, which is, I mean, to be honest, for us, a very positive result and very encouraging, although we also see some regional disparities and results that are a bit lower in North America and Europe, who register 50%.
Okay, so we've talked about the state of play now, the present. What about the future? What do stakeholders think is the path forward for sustainable construction?
Well, there again, strong global consensus. Nearly 9 stakeholders out of 10 say that we need to do more to accelerate sustainable construction. This figure remains stable since last year, and it really is a solid signal of collective commitment.
Yeah, indeed. 87% is a very strong number that is shared everywhere, but still there were some regional differences. And something interesting here is that even if Europe has always been seen as a leader in sustainable construction, we see signs of what we call the waning enthusiasm here, because a higher than average share of respondents in Europe believes that we should actually go backwards regarding sustainable construction. It's a very marginal view. It's only 1 out of 10 respondents in a few countries, but it was a surprise to us.
Yeah, it's quite surprising given the momentum around the Déclaration Chaillot just a year ago. And why do you think that is? Is it to do with ever-changing regulations or maybe a broader backlash against environmental concerns? I mean, there's still a high consensus overall, 87% of stakeholders that say we need to do more. So if sustainable construction is a priority, and if the public and the professionals agree, the next question naturally is, what should be put in place to accelerate it? How do we go about it?
Well, the action that the stakeholders identify, we can see already two major aspects. The first one, and that was talked a bit earlier, the first one is about the affordability of sustainable solutions. So increasing the affordability of sustainable solution is actually the first thing that is mentioned by the stakeholders. And the second one is about raising awareness to foster collaboration. Each of these actions are considered priorities by 1 in 3 stakeholders. We can also see in this chart that the use of biomaterials and making the performance of sustainable construction more visible arrive close and are actually gaining ground this year. On the other end of the chart, so on the right part of the slide, we can see that public initiatives, so public aids, public regulations, arrive at the bottom of the list and do not appear to be key levers for acceleration for stakeholders.
And there again, it's worth noting that among citizens, we find a very similar focus. We have same numbers, 1 citizen in 3 who insist on the same key drivers of acceleration. So they say it's affordability, raising public awareness, and using biomaterials. And as for stakeholders, they put public initiative at the bottom of the list, and they don't seem to be considered as a priority.
Okay, so now we've covered the priorities. Next, I guess, is who should lead the charge? Who's going to transform the sector? Who are the stakeholders more concerned or engaged by it? Or who should be?
Yeah, well, according to the Barometer, the answer is quite clear. We really have architects and engineers at the top of the list who are seen as the most legitimate actors. They are quoted by 56% of stakeholders, and they are followed by private companies, quoted by 44%. So this shows that the players who are involved at the design phase of construction are seen as a crucial driving force for sustainable construction. This being said, it's interesting to see that even if some profiles, such as the tradespeople, arrive at the bottom of the list, nobody's excluded from the scope. And so this is also a sign that there's a need to involve all the value chain in the process.
And what about real actions now on the ground? What's happening? And earlier, Thierry alluded to training, for instance, and education. I mean, how important is that to accelerate sustainable construction?
Yes, well, unfortunately, when we look at concrete commitments, it's where the gap becomes more visible. So if you look at the left side of the chart, we see that, for instance, for professional, 2/3 say that they evaluate the carbon footprint of their project, but only 1/3 do it systematically. So there's a good intention, but it's not yet a standard practice.
Yeah, and the same goes actually for the elected officials. So on the middle of the slide, 51% of the elected officials say that they want to exclude public contracts that ignore sustainable construction, but only 37% of them actually have done so already. So this number is actually a good number, and it's increasing since last year, plus 26 points. But still, there is an intention-action gap that shows up again and again in the data.
And we see the same trend with association. We see that 3 out of 4 say they would be willing to call for a boycott of construction companies who do not make enough efforts towards sustainability, but only 1 out of 4 has actually done it in reality.
And for the last target of the stakeholders, the students, we have actually seen the same pattern, because 78% of the students say that they see sustainability as something that makes a difference in the job market. Yet, when we ask them if they would refuse a job offer from a non-committed company, only 5% of them say, yes, without hesitation, I would refuse this job offer.
Interesting there again. So I think it's showing us that we're not yet teaching sustainable construction or sustainability as a non-negotiable value here. It's seen as a plus, but it's not yet seen as a professional norm. So according to you and your insights from the barometer here, what's holding the sector to move from awareness to action?
Well, I think it was mentioned, and I think that one of the explanations that the data gives us is training. We see here on the chart that only 28% of stakeholders feel that they are fully informed about sustainable construction. And when we look at the right-hand side, we see that only 1/3 of professionals have received specialized training. The same goes for the students, so the future of the sector. Only 28% say that they receive regular instruction on sustainable construction topics. So I think this might be part of the answer.
Okay, well, that was super helpful. Let's summarize maybe the key takeaways here of what we've covered. We've seen that awareness is rising, that sustainable construction is considered a priority by the majority of stakeholders and reassuringly by citizens. We've also seen that we're standing at crossroads here, a moment where intention has to become action. And we have also seen some differences between regions, between different stakeholder types, of course, and between what people value and what they will act on, especially your last point about whether you would go for a job in sustainable construction or not. Interesting one there. So you gave us some very interesting reflection points here. Once again, there is no one-size-fits-all model. We need further clarity in how we define sustainability, in how we measure it, and how we talk about it while understanding that there are different situations across the world. And what's probably very much required here is a greater coordination as well amongst all the stakeholders, public, private, civic, academia. And above all, if I may, I think that what we need here is to be bold, to show courage, to be brave, to challenge old habits, to push boundaries, and to rethink how we design and how we build. Many thanks to both of you for those fantastic insights to kickstart our next conversation. Extremely valuable indeed. Once again, thank you very much. Please access the barometer by scanning this QR code if you are here in the room with us. Thank you so much. Much food for thought indeed for our next panel discussion, titled, How do we turn data, all this information into action? So let's explore next during a discussion with Pascal Eveillard, Vincent Quitiot, and Hélène Chartier. Please come and join me here on stage. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us here this afternoon. Pascal Eveillard, you are Group Director, Sustainable Business Development and Sustainable Construction at Saint-Gobain. Vincent Quitiot, you are an architect, also Chief of the Urban Energy Unit at UN Habitat. And Hélène Chartier, you are Director of Urban Planning and Design at C40 Cities. That's a network of global megacities committed to the fight against climate change. So thanks for joining us this afternoon. Very different perspectives on a very important topic and very different intervention points in the value chain here, but with the same desire, of course, to transform construction. So I'm going to turn to you, Pascal, to start with. The barometer we just discussed showed us that there is no one-size-fits-all model here. and understanding regional expectations and needs is essential. So how can we align global ambitions with local adaptation, especially when construction ecosystems can be so different from one region to another?
Yes, definitely. Global challenges, local solutions. It has been reminded by Ilham, by Thierry earlier today. So global challenges, I will repeat that we are facing global warming, we are facing resource and biodiversity depletion, we are facing pollutions, we are facing people who are not living in comfortable and healthy conditions. We need to bring first to a global understanding level that buildings have a huge contribution to those global challenges. Very often, when it comes to global warming, for instance, people will think of transportation, they will think of energy sector, of industry. The construction sector very often is bypassed. So we need to put the construction sector at the very center of the understanding of these major challenges we are facing. Second, we have seen that when we talk sustainable construction, people very much believe in terms of environmental impacts, reduction of environmental impacts. I think as a global challenge, we need to explain that sustainable construction is not just about reducing environmental impact, but also enhancing health and well-being of people and about resilience. So resilience has come pretty high this year in the results. So it's a mix of social resilience and environmental aspects that we need to put together at global level. And the third topic, which has not yet been mentioned, even if we have seen that people don't believe that policies can play a role, I think still believe that at global level, policies have a role to play. If we take the example of global warming, we have started to act at scale because of COP21, and we are acting at scale in the building sector, and we are making progress because of the building breakthrough of the declaration of Chaillot, as you mentioned before. So we need to create also some momentum in terms of advocacy and policy, and this has to happen at global level. Then, for sure, local contexts are different, expectations from communities and populations are different, stakeholders in the building and construction sector are different from country to country and even sometimes at very local level. So we need to match those local realities. We need to create local collaborations between stakeholders to be able to bring the most relevant answers according to the local expectations. And we need also to adapt to the local reality of architecture, of materials, and construction habits.
Thank you very much. Vincent, next, I'd like you to maybe follow up on what Pascal mentioned, and that's also one of the key takeaways, I guess, from the Barometer. It's this need to maybe better explain the social and economic benefits of sustainable construction, because you're based in Kenya, and it's a part of the world that is not only facing very harsh climate conditions, but also very rapid urbanization due to an explosion in the population growth here, with a housing deficit estimated at, listen to that, 160 million, leading to a rise, of course, in informal settlements with all the economic and social problems we know that are attached to it. So in your view, how can we better promote those social and economic benefits of sustainable construction? And what's key here? We've talked about the need for greater education, for instance. Is that something you're feeling in your part of the world as well?
Thank you so much for the question. First of all, thank you very much for inviting UN Habitat to be part of this very important discussion. Just to say that today we are facing, the 21st century is facing with three major challenges. The first one is poverty. The second one is the housing crisis. And then the third one is a climate change. So if you look at all the three elements, you realize that they are all interconnected. Because when you look at the poverty issue, if you address the housing issue, you create job opportunity so that people can also better themselves. If you look at even eco-building material, you create more jobs because you have more people involved in the production of this material. So again, very important. If we find a better solution for houses that are affordable. Elnan mentioned the fact that 3 billion people are living in inadequate housing, and 1 billion people are living in the slum. And you just mentioned 160 million of houses that are needed, the crisis. It's very important. But why things are not happening? The barometer was very important to mention that there is a growing awareness on sustainable building construction. One way is to have the growing awareness, but why is it that things are not happening? I just want to bring some statistic here. In Kenya that you just mentioned, do you know that 80% of buildings are designed by non-architects? 80%. This is very important. So how do you promote sustainable construction in an environment where masons are the one designing, building, they are building the houses? It is very important to, how do you train them to do that? Again, the issue of architects, which is also very important. If you realize there are some countries in sub-Saharan Africa without school of architecture. This is also very important because sustainable construction requires some basic knowledge, some basic strategic knowledge on designing natural ventilation, solar protection, using locally available material. It needs some basic design. And again, what the barometer was also mentioning, which I found it very interesting, is that capacity building is very important. So as we are trying to address the issue of affordable houses, of adequate houses, we need to have more architects, more skilled people that can actually propose the solution that we want to see. It is not happening. But I don't want to be very negative in that. A lot is happening in Africa in this context. We are seeing a growing number of green building council. For example, in Kenya, we have one vibrant green building council in place that is really promoting awareness on sustainable building construction. We also have the private sector that are also very interesting. In South Africa, we have basically green building labeling being put in place, which is also very important. But most of the time, and this is also another element which I found it very interesting in the observatory, it was mentioning about the resilience. You know, resilience is very simple. When people see the impact of climate change, they see the flooding, they see the landslide, where people are dying. So they start now asking, what can we do to improve? And that's perhaps the reason why in Africa, the resilient people are more and more interested on how can I design a house that will withstand the climate change impact. So again, just to say that awareness is there. More and more government are also putting in place building codes that are environmentally friendly. They are trying to integrate some of these elements of sustainability in the construction sector. And perhaps what we should also look at, which was also very highly highlighted by the previous discussion, was about the value chain. We need to look at the entire value chain of the building construction. Look at the architects, look at the type of design, and also looking at those people who are living in the design, and also make sure that we involve the population so that they also make a better living condition out of it, so that they can also improve their living condition. So again, I just want to say that yes, the trend is there, very good, and we believe that with time, we'll also start seeing some mass construction coming in out of all this activity that are currently taking place now.
Thank you so much, Vincent, for this very thorough presentation of the challenges you are facing in that part of the world, but also the opportunities, and for reminding us that community empowerment is also essential to the success of sustainable construction, of course. Now, Hélène, I'd like you to intervene or maybe discuss another important takeaway here of the Sustainable Construction Barometer, and it's this gap maybe between intention and action among locally elected officials, because cities are where all this should be implemented and happening, of course. So what are, according to you, the biggest blockers to systemizing sustainable construction, and how can local leaders overcome them?
Yeah, this is a very important question, and as part of C40, this is really something we are working. I feel now most of the city leaders, at least all the C40 mayors, they know what needs to be done. They have developed clearly their inventory of emission. They know, depending the city, where the emissions come from. They know what are the actions. They have all. It was mandatory to be part of C40 to deliver a climate action plan aligned with the objective of the Paris Agreement. So I think they have a good understanding of their objective and action. Now the key challenge is really to go from these vision, this objective, to a form of implementation, or what we call mainstreaming strategy. And for this, we are working now on this with the mayors. There is a few elements that we have identified. One that Vincent mentioned, it's even if people don't believe, the policies, legally binding policies, enforceable policies. And actually, master plan, building code, local government have very important authority over this document. So basically, mainstreaming the objectives they identify in their climate action plan within their master plan, the spatial development framework, and building codes is very important. The second pillar that now all of C40 cities will have to do, for example, they will have to also embed this in their own procurement, because they need to pave the way to show that also when developing themselves, their high school, their cultural equipment, whatever, that they show the way. And the third thing is local governance. So we need also to work with the cities about how they embed this type of decision, sustainability in their decision. One of the programs we are working closely with the cities is what we call the climate budgeting, which is really, so all of C40 city will have to deliver a climate budgeting governance in the coming years. And the idea is that every decision they will make on the construction of the building, but also other field of sustainability, they will have to have an evaluation of the carbon impact of their project. So when they will build a school or a project, they will have to say, okay, if I take this decision, it will change this amount of money, but it will reduce. And every year they will identify an objective in terms of carbon emission, and as a form of budget. So every city has a budget, financial budget, and now they will have a carbon budget, and they will have to respect every year. So in this governance, they can also really track, and that's something that we ask to the private sector, like construction. They will ask them to deliver to calculate their carbon footprint, but then we need the city also to follow that for their own decision. The second thing that I think is very important is that for cities to have a form of clear and long-term objective where they want to go, so the market can also prepare themselves. There is sometimes too much change, so the rules can be flexible, but at least the key objective in terms of for example, we have seen a lot of cities trying now to tackle the problem of demolition, reconstruction, these elements, use of material construction, clear objective in terms of emission reduction and climate resilience. They need to set for a very long term, and then to organize in coordination and discussion with the private sector a form of progression towards this target. I think it's very important. And the last element I wanted to mention, I think it's important also to create a form of innovative partnership with the private sector to advance this agenda. I would like to mention one example. It's not the only one, of course, but one example. We are in Paris right now. The city of Paris, several years ago, have developed a call for project called Réinventer Paris. Now at C40, we have been developing Reinventing Cities exactly based on the same model, but focusing only on climate change, construction and climate change. And the objective is really to mobilize the private sector to test, to innovate with the city what is possible and how they can pave the way for innovation in the construction. We have done that now in 27 global cities. A lot of different projects are now being developed, and that's very important because the city can also check the readiness of the market for this type of solution. Sometimes local representatives are also a little bit scared because of the trilogy of problems that Vincent mentioned, that they are scared a little bit to destabilize the market, so they don't really know if they can make a policy. But you can start with this type of call for project or innovative partnership to really create this discussion and evaluate the financial readiness of a solution. And then you set the scene for the long term. Now it's just a pilot. Tomorrow it's going to be the new norm. And when you look, for example, the master plan of Paris, the recent master plan of Paris, they embed a lot of solutions they tested 5 years ago in their Réinventer Paris call for project that now become the new norm in their new master plan. So that's this form of organization of the transformation that I think is very important.
And very interesting indeed. Now, before we move on to a second round of questions for you, I just wanted to remind the audience here in the room and online that you probably have loads of questions to send us, and for our experts and various stakeholders here on stage. So please do send us your questions in the chat box, or if you're here in the room, please hold on to them. We will address them at the end of our discussion. Pascal, I just wanted to go back to what we talked about earlier, is this human dimension, comfort, well-being, health. It's still very much undervalued. From your perspective at Saint-Gobain, what are you doing or endeavoring to do to raise more awareness about it?
Yes, definitely. I think we have a first challenge, which is to better document good practices and better realizations. We need to explain people what's in for them in a more sustainable building. What can I get personally? So not just for the environment, but for me personally. In financial terms, there might be some kind of savings. Typically, energy efficiency is delivering savings. But on top of savings, it can be also better health. It can be for my children at school, it's a better learning conditions. For my parents in the hospital, better recovery. So these are kinds of things that need to be explained, documented with facts and figures, and local facts and figures. I think we have some evidence today. There have been great reports, business cases on why sustainable construction delivers. We need to make those business cases much more local, because a business case in Paris, when I am in Africa, I'm not sure it speaks very much to me. So we need to have good examples everywhere that speaks to the people locally, where they can identify themselves to what has been made, to say, oh, I want to have it as well. I know it's feasible, it's achievable for me. So this is one. And for that, we need to have, beyond regulations, we need to have good practices. So it means we need to have cases to demonstrate. So not to wait that regulation has been made, because it will be mandatory. So we need to have trendsetters, we need to have players that want to be in advance to regulations, to make those cases and convince people to move. Cities are clearly well placed to help develop such cases. So by being close to people, to have at neighborhood level some experiments, to have some analysis of those experiments, to leverage to other neighborhoods, I think it's very valuable. So we need to have more collaboration between trendsetters, between local players, to have good practice cases, and to work on the good communication of this good example to the general public.
I think that very much links to what you were saying, actually, Hélène, the fact that you've got to build this bank of case studies, of examples, and show that some things do work. And that's the way you can replicate them, I guess, and really scale up. Vincent, I was seeing you taking loads of notes here, because I'm sure you have a lot to say about this human dimension, of course, but given that so many builders in Africa, for instance, and in many other areas in the world where there are very strong and urgent needs for affordable and sustainable construction, and the need for education and training that you required with people that don't have formal education, how do you go about that? How do you make it possible?
Thank you very much. I think the first thing is that we need to demystify the concept of sustainable construction. Because when we look at it, it seems that it's something that is coming from somewhere else.
From a
And
lab.
when you look at the vernacular architecture, the traditional architecture, you realize that most of these elements were there and they are not being modernized. There have not been any transition towards modern. They just assume modern material, come and replace the traditional material without actually using it in a proper way so that you can create the comfort that is needed. So again, we need to look at the vernacular architecture, get elements there so that you use those elements to improve the modern architecture. We need also to look into the different, the existing solution and also existing material and see how do we use those material to have houses that are affordable, because affordability means that things that are the purchasing power of the community can afford. And then if you involve the community, even in the construction of the buildings, the cost of the building also come down. So it is a lot of work to do. But I agree with him when he talk about sharing best practices. You will be very surprised. We, in Habitat, for example, we have an award together with the Association of the International Union of Architects on SDG award in architecture. And every year we publish a document on it. You'll be very surprised to see that there are a lot of best practices. A lot of things are happening. But most of the time, these best practices are not shared. Perhaps we need to make sure that we really public more awareness on those. And then, of course, also making sure that the government also lead by example, by when they are building their houses or buildings or school, they try to make sure that those schools are using environmentally friendly solution, because that is the thing. Seeing is believing. And in fact, our buildings, our office building in Nairobi is one of the example. I mean, when we started putting solar panel in the roof, we were the first. The UN buildings was the first ever building in Kenya, in sub-Saharan Africa, with solar panel, half megawatt of electricity. And today there are more than 50 buildings that are, because people are coming and seeing it and then say that the building of the future, in fact, that was the name that was given to it. So sharing best practice is very important. That is really what I call the low-hanging fruit. And of course, also planning. We need to plan in advance. We know that the population is growing. We know how many people will be in each given city in Africa in 20 years from now. Why are we not planning the city so that we can accommodate all of that?
Absolutely.
So again, yes.
Thank you so much, Vincent. Thank you for highlighting something we discussed a lot, actually, when in Venice, at the Biennale of Architecture, the fact that when it comes to sustainable construction, we don't always need to reinvent the wheel here. We need to turn back to heritage, local practices that can show us, how it used to be done, and for some, in many cases anyway, it used to work. Hélène, same here. How do we insist on this, human dimension of sustainable construction to make sure that locally elected officials can maybe share all the benefits with all their stakeholders and their full value chain?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very important point. Even we work daily with mayors and city. We want courageous mayors to be re-elected. And we know that they won't be re-elected only about climate change. They need to show the social impact of their action and the co-benefits of their action. And I want to take two concrete example, and then I would love to build on what you said about planning. The first thing is retrofit an existing building. I think everyone who has lived in a building that is not well insulated know the health impact of living in terms of overheating, sometimes of cold during the winter. What does that mean for the people who are living inside in terms of and their family? they also know what it means in terms of energy cost. So I think showing that by basically developing a large scale plan to help citizen and owner of building to retrofit their existing building, you can definitely show a co-benefit, not only in terms of emission reduction, but in terms of cost savings, but also in terms of quality of life and health for the inhabitants. The second example is about, and that's a topic we have been discussing with Pascal quite a lot, about also transformation of the material in the public space, and what does that mean for the streets, for the public, for the neighborhood. We know that the material of construction are reflecting a lot of heat when you are walking in the street, for example. So the use of concrete, the use of reflective glazed facade, for example, will have a very important effect on urban heat island, for example. So showing, there is some cities, I remember Madrid or other, like walking in the street start to become a real challenge, a health problem. So transforming also the built environment for also creating an outdoor environment that is still safe and healthy to walk in. This is a real challenge, and this means discussion also with the constructor and the companies, so we can transform this type of element. On the planning element, and I wanted to mention, because in the Barometer this is not mentioned as a priority, but actually construction is also the form of the construction and where do you build. And I think that's very important. There is, the IPCC report mentioned a better urban planning is 25% less emissions, so it's very clear. And this comes from transport, of course, compact city, mixed-use cities, that mean less dependent to car. It also mean less construction material, and because you will have smaller housing unit in a compact city, and you will have shared walls. And actually, shared walls is a very powerful way to reduce both embodied emission and to reduce operational emission in the building. I was reading an article recently, a research made in Toronto was showing that a townhouse, so it's not a multifamily, it's just a townhouse, has twice less embodied emission than a detached house because you will have this form of compact and shared walls and everything. So we need also to integrate the urban planning factor in the construction that are so important. Another very small example, underground parking. A lot of cities are now, and we work with them to get rid of parking requirement in dense cities area. Underground parking, it's a building, the same building with underground parking will have between 50% to 100% more emission than embodied emission constructions at the same building without the underground parking. And this is crazy when you think about it, that like the space that is not used by human is the one who will emit more in terms of construction. So it's also approaching this transformation of the construction with a form of data, knowledge. It's not sometimes transforming the construction of material, sometimes just getting rid of one parking. There is not, and everyone says, there is not one solution, but making sure they can calculate, that's the best. But also, if they cannot calculate, at least having some ideas of principle how to design in a way, I think that's very the key.
Thank you so much, Hélène. We need to wrap up, so very quickly before we do, and before we move on to our Q&A session, I've got this last question for all of you, to end on action, of course. That's important. If we want sustainable construction to go mainstream, what is the one thing we should either stop doing or should start doing today? Please.
What we need to start doing from now is considering sustainability topics from the very start of the project. When having a project at design stage or even pre-design stage, to have people discussing together of what should be the sustainability content of the project. If it's not well taken on board from the start, we know that it will be more difficult to implement later. It will cost more, so we should stop having things thought later in the process. And I think we need, in the same perspective, we need also to stop looking only at the construction stage and the construction cost to take a more holistic approach, a more whole life cycle approach, what it will bring to the different stakeholders also over the life of the building. A building is not built for 1 year. It's not a consumer good. It lasts long. So we need to consider this duration and all the costs and all the benefits over the lifetime.
And the durability of a building. Thank you very much. Vincent.
Very, very complex question. But anyway, I like the approach of looking at the whole value chain of the building construction and then look at having an approach that is holistic. Because traditionally we have been very sectorial, saying that if we have the land, we'll have the buildings. If we have the finance, we can build. But in the reality, sometimes the design is very important. Today we have the artificial intelligence that can also help us bring in some of the elements. So I would rather say that it is we really need to have this global view, and we should also look into mass construction. We should start looking at mass construction of buildings because the challenges are huge. So holistic view and getting towards mass construction of buildings.
Thank you, Vincent. Hélène.
Maybe I agree with both, but I will maybe add one from, I think it's regenerative design, regenerative planning, like how we transform the existing, how we try to reduce demolition and make the most of the existing asset. When you look at the number of vacant buildings in a lot of places, that's a big problem. And regenerative planning. We know that expansion of the cities are 50% faster than this population. And in Europe, in North America, and a lot, this is even worse. So fighting expansion, making the most of the existing urban fabric, and using the power of regenerative design. Sometimes a lot of people think that renovating is more expensive than something. This is not true. If you have the right technique, it can be 45% on average less expensive to renovate and than rather than demolishing and building new. So we need also, and we come back to what we said before, educate the next generation and the current generation of architect and planner to work on this regenerative approach of planning and design.
Well, thank you very much. What a rich and helpful conversation here with so many different avenues to explore. Many thanks to all of you. You are staying with us because next we are going to address the questions we almost undoubtedly have here in the room. So we have a question over there, please. It's working. Oh, maybe not. Okay.
Now I'm audible?
Much better.
Yes, great. Thank you so much for this insightful conversation, for organizing this. I have a question pertaining to buildings as material banks. In the light of sustainable construction, how far do we think are from this BAM model? Because from what I understand, the idea is to not create static buildings, but rather dismantleable buildings, wherein we can dismantle the parts and create new one. My question is about that. What is the perception and how far are we towards it?
So are you talking about the circularity of the various parts of a building?
Yes,
Okay.
it is about circular economy.
Regenerative architecture, I guess, is all about that. Hélène, do you want to address that question, maybe?
Yes, this is, I mean, a lot of cities are working on it, and especially, for example, Chinese cities are working quite hard on the use of prefabricate buildings that are usually easier to demonstrate and reuse. And so there is some experimentation there. This is not so easy, but that's definitely one of the solutions that we need to use to try. Other cities in Netherlands, for example, they are working on the passport of materials. That have been a big work about trying to work about basically identify all of the material and that are in the building and see since the beginning when you basically develop it, see how you can reuse. And there is also a big challenge. I know there are a lot of cities about where you stock the material in when you transform them, because there is stock is very expensive in a city. So making sure in the metropolitan area you also allocate some place where when you demonsel or you basically deconstruct a building, you can keep this material and allow this form of exchange. So there are a lot of experimentation here, but I would say there is still a lot to do on this matter.
But clearly, in developed countries like in Europe, if we want to be able to reduce the impact of the construction sector on the depletion of natural resources, we need to recycle and to reuse more than we have done in the past. One good example with the city of Paris, we have signed 2 agreements as Saint-Gobain to collect from public buildings which are going renovation, either the windows to recycle the glass into new glass, or the plasterboards to recycle into new plasterboards. So this is clearly the kind of win-win situation. So waste management is a big issue for cities. For us as manufacturers, we need to have secondary raw materials to replace virgin raw materials in our products. It's also a good way, especially for glass, to reduce the carbon footprint of those products. So clearly, there is a great benefit to tap into those existing resources to avoid new quarries, to avoid new use of virgin raw materials. So this is developing. For reuse, we still have some regulatory limitations. So we need to have something that will help and facilitate the reuse of materials, to put it on the safe side regarding insurance. But clearly, there is a big move forward to use more those materials which have been already implemented.
Thank you for your question. Very pertinent indeed. Any more from the room here? Yes, we have a question from the lady here in the middle. Microphone. Not yet. Okay. If not, we've got one that works here. Right, try this one. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's better. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. My question is maybe for Helen. You mentioned for the mayors of the C40 program the necessity to have a carbon budget, like the financial budget. Are they considering only the construction part, if they do calculate that, or also the use of the building? And do we have the necessary tools to do it properly, or you think there is a need to develop things?
This is a very first the carbon budget approach is not just for the construction. So even, for example, where they change the menu in schools that eating, they also need to measure. The idea is really to have a form of methodology for every decision that the city will make. But you're right. As we all say, construction and buildings are a major part of approximately 50% of the emission of cities. So it's an important way. So I think, yes, they consider both construction and operational emission. So for example, if deciding about retrofitting one of their own equipment, for example, or the social housing that they own and everything, they will consider like the benefit in terms of reducing operational emission from the building. So yes, they need some tool to do it, and they need also a team to do it. That means, and one of the things which is very important is to try to, instead of having this team who will evaluate the carbon impact or the environmental impact of every decision they make as a form of a separate team, we try to push them to embed these in the financial department of the cities. Because the financial department of the cities have, before joining C40, I was working with the mayor of Paris. you have this type of final meeting where you have like key department, key deputy mayor who come and you evaluate a project. Okay, should we push on the button? Should we make the decision? And you have a key, and the financial department is always there. Of course, because there is this idea of budget and you need to evaluate, should we make this decision? The idea is that the same team is also trained to evaluate the carbon footprint of the decision and basically compare with the financial investment of the cities and everything. So that's not an easy thing, but we have seen the cities that is more well known for having developing this methodology is Oslo in Norway, but now we have several cities, and I would say this is not something only for the global north. This is something we are also working closely with some global south cities, Cape Town in South Africa and everything, to try also to incorporate in their governance. And I think it's very fair in some way because that's something we push the private sector to do, a form of data-driven approach of their design, of their decision. I think that's the idea is to do the same for the political decision of a mayor of a city.
Thank you very much. We have a question from our online audience here. It's the question that has been most liked by the audience, and it's the following. Do you think citizens are willing to pay more to enable more sustainable construction? And there again, this question really, is sustainable construction more expensive at the end of it all? Who wants to address that question? Vincent.
Maybe I can start. I believe that citizens, if given properly, if they are well informed about the benefit of sustainable construction, they will pay for it. The reason being, there was a housing crisis in America, and there was a data survey. They realized that those people who were in the green buildings, houses that were labeled green, and they were paying more, there were very few default people because they realized there were a lot of environmental benefit, health benefit for this building because you are actually living in the house that has no any health hazards. They are also betterly designed and also good for the environment. So they did whatever they could to retain their buildings. So I believe that if we explain to people and they see the benefit, they will pay for it. I'm convinced because we are more and more being invited by architect association to come and give lecture on green building design. Because one thing is to have natural lighting and to have artificial lighting. There is a big difference. And therefore, it's really the way we pack the way we present a sustainable building design. I think people will be able to pay for it when they see the benefit, the economic benefit and also the health benefit that come with it.
That's a very valid point. If you're happy living somewhere, of course, there's less chances of it being repossessed, and you're going to be generally very, very, much happier indeed. Do we have any more questions online or maybe from the live audience here? Oh, we've got this really interesting question here, there again from the online audience. How can citizens be more involved in the future of sustainable urban planning based on the findings of this edition? So there again, how can we involve communities, civil society, everyday people, the people using the buildings we're talking about? How can we involve them more in the process of sustainable construction?
No, one thing is, first, there is a strong desire to do it. I think it's very clear. And I think we should not oppose top-down planning and bottom-up planning, if I can say. It's not exactly the same decision you will put in both, I would say. Vincent was mentioning before, I think the idea of anticipating the need of housing. I think it's even the first step. You need to anticipate the population growth, the need of housing and everything.
you can do that only at the metro city or even metropolitan scale, and maybe there is something here a little bit top down and everything. But there is a lot of decision that could be a little bit done more at the neighborhood scale and other. And there is, I would say, a lot of discussion right now within the cities around the urban planning model of cities, and especially the polycentric development of the cities. That's something that a lot of cities are discussing. It's not just about compact, it's also about creating a form of what some cities call complete neighborhood. So you create neighborhood where you have the mix of use, you have the mix of different housing typology, you have the mix of function and everything. So in that case, by creating, instead of having a monocentric cities, which is basically a very mixed-use compact city center, and then a very fragmented land use with residential area separated with complex business district and everything, you have a more integrated development of the cities. And this polycentric development of the cities is also a very strong opportunity to have this form of neighborhood scale planning. If you look Seoul, for example, or Johannesburg, or many cities are now really working at this neighborhood scale to develop a form of neighborhood planning that is a form of complement to the master plan of the cities, where they work with the citizens to identify what are the priority projects that the city should finance in terms of public space design, in terms of development of specific services or amenities, in terms. So I think the two are very complementary, and yes, I think more and more also process have been developed to deliver this type of element.
Maybe two more good reasons to foster cooperation at local level. For existing buildings, we know that renovation is at stake, and clearly having a more collaborative approach at neighborhood level to scale down the cost, to have some common approach and economies of scale in the end is very valuable. And second, one topic that will bring cities and citizens to work together is adaptation, resilience. You mentioned it before, Hélène. Clearly, we know there is an interaction between the buildings and the neighborhood and vice versa, and solutions will not happen on one without considering the others, and this can be developed jointly to optimize the solutions between what will have to be taken at neighborhood level and what will be embarked in the building.
Thank you very much. And Vincent, I mean, earlier you alluded to the need for better urban planning. If we included civic society, I mean, everyone out there in the process, would it lead to a better outcome?
Definitely. By the way, in Kenya, the new constitution allowed for community consultation for any planning at the neighborhood level. You need to start with stakeholder consultation. You need to make sure that everybody that is somehow involved has their say. And then you present the project to them, they give their view, and you need to also write down what they have actually say. Most of the time, there are some environmental issue, there are also economic feature, economic impact. They want to see how these are addressed before the plan is even approved. So again, just to say that, and this has been some of the issue that the UN Habitat has been advocating for, because we are against forced eviction, for example. We don't want people to be moved because the city want to build a new, transform the neighborhood. We want them to be involved right from the beginning. That's why planning is very important, but the community has to be involved so that they can give their say. Even if you are allowed to move them, but you have to explain to them the reason why you are moving them, and then together you get a solution. So fully support this idea.
Thank you so much. Another question from the online audience here. What are the main shifts you've observed in sustainable construction priorities compared to previous editions of the Barometer? Maybe that's a question for Occurrence IFOP here. The main shifts in sustainable construction priorities compared to previous editions. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that the main shift that we've noticed is the rise in awareness. That was a main gap, a main evolution is the rise of in awareness among the stakeholders that we've seen compared to previous edition. And I think maybe the second shift I would underline would be this also the rising position of resilience in the definition that is given of sustainable construction. Then we see other regional differences, but the two main findings or the two big evolution I would mention would be those two.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Alban. Do we have another question from the audience here, maybe in the auditorium? We have one last question from the auditorium. Thank you.
I just have a question about how we have 2050 as a deadline to reach carbon neutrality, but when it comes to climate-ready buildings, are we really moving as fast as we would hope for? Is the political landscape really addressing the topic currently? How do you see it evolving? Are we going to be ready by 2050?
I think we
That's
all
quite a
would love
question.
to say yes, but I don't think it's, no, to be honest, I don't think so. That being said, for example, at C40, we try to avoid now speaking about 2050, because even if 2050 is quite soon, it's not the way to engage the discussion with the city, because it's even too far for them to project or to come to the discussion about, is that financially viable? I think we need to work now on, so we need, of course, this form of objective to shape the solution and everything. And if you look the trend, yes, no, I don't think we are going to be ready. That being said, in the narrative, I don't think it's so interesting to push this 2050 objective, because sometimes it's too far from the reality of what citizens and elected officials are living.
No, I will answer in a more positive way, in the sense that there is the research demonstrate that the awareness is growing, meaning that people are now concerned. The other thing is that we also have some factors in the market, like the carbon credits. It was not there before. So for each project that you put on the table, they will ask you what is the environmentally cost. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was not there. In fact, we should be going to the supermarket and see, when I'm buying this water, I should see the carbon cost. It's not there, but I'm sure very, very soon they will start putting. And if you look at a lot of NDC, the commitment for the country towards net zero carbon, they are actually increasing their commitment and saying that there will be net zero carbon by so and so. The other point is we are seeing the rising of the electric cars in our street. It was not there before. Just 10 years ago in Paris, you will not see this thing happening. So I will say that efforts are there. I'm not sure whether we'll make it, but I think that there is really a political will that is actually driving us towards the carbon neutrality that we are seeing happening.
And possibly the sense of urgency coming from the need to adapt, because unfortunately climate change is already there, so we see the effects. So possibly it can be an additional driver for policymakers, but also for people to act. And hopefully when working on new projects, on renovations to adapt to new climatic conditions, they will also embark the other topics all together. And we see there is pressure. So in some parts of the world, like the US, today you can't insure anymore your home if it's not meeting some requirements for adaptation. So maybe it's a bit extreme, but it will possibly accelerate the move.
Thank you very much. Many thanks to you, of course, and to everyone watching us for your questions. The online audience has sent us lots of questions. We could not address them all, of course, but we selected the ones that were most liked by the audience. But many thanks to all of you for your great insights today. I think that was a perfect illustration of how you move from data to action. Indeed, huge thanks to all of you, Pascal, Vincent, and Hélène, for your thoughts today with us. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vincent. Thank you. Thank you, Pascal. And next, I'd like to invite the head of the Sustainable Construction Observatory to come and join us to address a few questions, Fabienne Robert. We've covered a lot today. Many of the insights of the Barometer have been discussed, and I'd like to know more about your own perspective, Fabienne. Which point do you think, or which insight has not been fully grasped by the industry that, in your view, could be a real game changer?
Thank you, Charlotte, for that question. But before taking the question, I want to thank all of you who took part in the session, and also all the people online, because we had many questions, and I know that it's quite frustrating not to be able to tackle all issues. Thank you all. Coming back to your question, Charlotte, I think that something which is not totally understood today, it's that it's sustainable construction, sustainability, it's about longevity. And longevity, it's about durability and well-being. It's a time of climate extreme, social and economic pressure. It's a time of we are challenged, and we really need to ask: do we have buildings that will last and that will meet the needs of people tomorrow? That's a big question. And if we focus on resilience, it was mentioned several times by the Institute survey and during the panel. It's a key topic. It's not an option now. I think that we all agree on that. It's a necessity. And I think that today, it's not maybe the connection between sustainable construction and between well-being is not so clear for people. But there is something there that we can work on it. Because I'm strongly convinced personally that if we are able to make the benefits of sustainable construction, and you mentioned also that, Hélène, in terms of health and well-being, if we are able to make them more visible, it will really drive adoption. So I think that it's something important, and it's really about making having buildings that are useful for the people, that are attractive, that are comfortable, that have value over time. And so that we need to work on that, I think.
So the longevity of buildings, that sustainability, durability, well-being, and of course resilience, as you mentioned. Now, Ed Lam of UN Habitat earlier alluded to the importance of having data, of having information, having this sort of starting point, that base to work from when you want to accelerate sustainable construction. And I think that clearly the Barometer is providing that basis indeed. So tell us about your aspirations for the observatory overall.
Well, I think that what we want for the observatory is really to help to drive change across the sector. We want to help to shift practices in the construction sector, and we want to. This means creating knowledge that is useful not only for construction professionals but also for policymakers. And for the public. And we had actually many questions regarding citizens, and they are key. So this is a key topic for us. And the idea is really to break down barriers that still hold back sustainable construction. We want to bring more energy. We want to bring more momentum about the transition. And I think that the goal of the observatory, but it's a shared goal, all of us today, I think, it's to make the sustainable construction a new standard. And for the observatory, we have a very concrete next step. We are preparing a white paper to be released at COP30. So You know that we will have COP30 in Belém in November, and we are working on a very interesting project to have to draft this white paper, and it will focus on key transformative issues. The idea is, the goal is to speed up, is to scale up, and so this white paper will be about these challenges. And stay tuned, because we will involve the whole observatories community, so all of you in the room and online.
A collective effort. Indeed, thank you very much, Fabienne. And many thanks to you for your attention, of course, here today. We've talked about the many challenges the sector and all the stakeholders are facing to accelerate sustainable construction. But I think the key word here, and you mentioned it, Fabienne, it's energy, to tackle all these challenges and those problems with great energy indeed. Many thanks to all of you once again. That's a wrap up from us today. I wish you very well in your sustainable construction journey.